Hello there, thank you very much for joining me again today. This is just an update video, not a particularly long video, on the Rhode Schwartz CMS54 radio communications test set. This is a follow-up video to a repair video that I did some time ago on this instrument, and I put it to one side after that video. I'll put a link in the description for that repair video, which I've done. Now it's taken me some time to try and get parts from Rhode Schwartz so you can get a price out of them for this particular part. Now this is a word of caution to anybody who buys Rhode Schwartz equipment. I have a number of instruments from Rhode Schwartz that I'll be doing videos on as well, but just to recap, originally this instrument came to me very cheap. I bought it along with a load of other equipment that I purchased from somebody who was selling up a load of test gear, and the person who sold it to me had accidentally fed too much RF power up the 50 watt port, and as well as that they'd fed a lot of power up the low power 1 watt port here, which is what's used with the tracking generator option that's on this, as well as the off-air monitor, and it's what is the high sensitive input for the RF. So that can only take maximum of 1 watt, and unfortunately both ports had been blown by high RF power. Now, insofar as the receive signal generator was concerned in the instrument, that worked fine, and in the previous video, if you watch it, which is obviously a link in the description as I've said, we found that the thick film substrate attenuator here had got a physical crack in it and damage. Now, to cut a long boring story short, we did a lot of analysis in the last video using the scalar network analyzer to sweep this attenuator, and we found by pressing on the glass substrate, the metal substrate that's this resistor's machined on, the fault disappeared. You know, we had a very high attenuation between these two ports here, the RF in port, which connects to this 50 watt socket, and then the 26 dB attenuation socket here, which leads off to one of the modules internally for measuring the transmit parameters, etc. And we found it had like an infinity attenuation, but when you pressed on the substrate, the attenuation went to 26 dB, and they use a diode as well to sense the RF power on these instruments, which is part of this substrate. It's buried under sort of these little blobs that are on the circuit board, but it's like a Schottky diode that they use for rectifying the RF, and that's fed off through these little feed-through caps. One's a temperature compensation diode, and the other's the actual RF measuring diode, and that's how it measures the RF power, which is set by this potentiometer here. You see after it's gone through all the op amps, and then it gets read and obviously displayed on here. And that wasn't reading properly too, because the airline crack went from the top here to there, right across it to the bottom, and it went across the what is the resistive element, which is this red dye stuff that you can see here. Where my thumbnail is, there's like two black marks, and they are actually the RF attenuator resistor element, the 50 ohm, and then it's like a T pad. One bit goes to the receive side, and then the other bit goes to another 20 dB attenuator. It's switched in and out via relays. So in duplex mode or in TX mode, it can get a low power feedback as well to be analysed at the same time as generating a receive signal out. Now this little substrate resistor here, with it having a crack in it, and it went through this red dye here. It wouldn't have been so bad if a crack had been anywhere else, but it went through this metal oxide sort of film RF attenuator resistor, which you'll see in the previous video I did. Unfortunately, it means that is not repairable, because I can't bridge it. There's sort of multi-layers to it, so I can't scrape it away and then redo the track. Might be something I could try, but to be honest, I think I'll be clutching at the straws. Now, I thought that this was just unique to me, that I'd just unfortunately dropped on what is a bit of a lemon test set that has numerous problems, and that I've dropped on a bit of bad luck, and this resistor, you know, has cracked physically, whether it's through high RF power or whether somebody's been in it and tightened the screws down. And I actually think that somebody's been in it as well, because I haven't noticed this until just now, but when I was trying to get the module out for the low power RF port at the front here, this coax goes to this module which sits here, and basically somebody's numbered these RF connectors. You can just see there's a 1, that's a 2, 3, and then somebody's labelled this one as a 4, and so on and so forth. So somebody's been in this before, and I hadn't noticed that until today actually. I've had this instrument a while, but I've just totally missed that. So I've had that module out a few times. And this is the other thing as well that I want to mention about Rohde Schwartz before I go into how much that little part cost there from Rohde Schwartz if you wanted to buy it. The service manual for this radio test set isn't available, and if it is available from Rohde Schwartz, it'd be extremely expensive. It'd probably nearly be half as much as what the test set was when I bought it, so it's just not economically viable to me to purchase the service manual for this particular model of instrument. However, there is a lot of service manuals available electronically on the internet and on eBay for Rohde Schwartz products, and they all tend to be radio testers that are different model numbers. Look identical, but they're a different model number. They're like the CMS54, which is identical to this, but it's not identical insofar as the modules are concerned inside. And the module which deals with the RF measurements for the what is the low sensitive port as well as the main TX port here, this module at the back is a different part number to what's in the circuit diagram. So the circuit diagram of the CMS52 radio test set and this model being the CMS54 is totally different. So the GaSfet amplifiers, monolithic microwave integrated circuit amplifiers, whatever they are, that are on the circuit board in there, which amplify the signal here to the correct level, they are different in this model to what they are in the other model, and they're laid out differently on the PCB. Now, when high RF power was fed in here, it blew the Pi Attenuator, which is made of 3 surface mount chip resistors that's in this particular module. I've replaced that, but it's still got a low RF. You know, if you put in 0 dBm here, for example, or minus 10 dBm, whatever the level is, it reads about 30 dBs lower than it actually should when you're looking at a measurement through this port. So obviously the track gen doesn't work properly because the levels are all out. It seems to tailor off as well up at the higher frequencies. So there's obviously a frequency sensitive component, which I suspect is the GaSfet mimic amplifiers or whatever that have failed, that's allowing that characteristic to appear. Now, one of the warnings I want to give people about Rohde Schwartz is that it's been my experience when I've done repairs on these in the past that there are a majority of components that are used in Rohde Schwartz that are available through most electronic component suppliers. Like for other instruments, you know, they use common electronic components. However, Rohde Schwartz is a little different than most other test equipment manufacturers. In many cases, some of the most easily damaged parts, such as the RF input, for example, uses custom built, milled and machined, specially constructed components, and that is a typical example. You won't see many test instruments like the Marconi, Hewlett Packard, Agilent, Anritsu. You know, you won't see most of the manufacturers use this type of custom built, if you like, RF attenuator. They may use custom ICs and FPGAs and ASICs and other chips and components that are in there that they'll rub the part numbers off and things like that, particularly for military application type devices, you know. But generally speaking, the most common fault you're going to get on a RF test set with regard to somebody feeding high RF power up into it is going to be the RF attenuator. Well, that little part there, I made an inquiry with Rhode Schwartz via email. I tried the UK office, and to be honest, Rhode Schwartz UK are pretty bad when it comes to communication, and they weren't really bothered. They just came back and basically said the radio test set is very old, from the 1990s, early 2000s. It's no longer supported, and goodbye. So I went to Rhode Schwartz directly in Germany, sent them an email, and they wanted to pass me back to the UK, but I explained to the Rhode Schwartz rep over in Germany that UK had messed me about, the UK office, and didn't really want to know, you know. So Rhode Schwartz Germany basically set me up a specialist account, a parts account, that when they do the quotations, etc., and you quote the part numbers, you can log in on their portal and it'll tell you what the quote is, the price for the component. So I got an email back after waiting a very long time, because I was passing it back between Germany and UK and batting and balling back and forth, and eventually I think they just wanted to get rid of me, really, because I was becoming a bit of a pain, sending them in emails saying, have you got an update, you know, where's this part, is it available, what cost is it, etc. So that little white RF attenuator section there, Rhode Schwartz wanted £504 for that, and that's not including VAT, which in the UK is currently at 20%. Now they also wanted to charge £50 just for handling that, just for some guy to go to the stores bin and get it out and then put it in a jiffy bag and send it to me, and they wanted £50 for that. So you're looking at nearly £600, Great British pounds, for that little white substrate resistor RF attenuator section. And they've got about 10 or 11 in stock apparently, but that's how much they're wanting to charge. So I thought, well, you know, there's no way I'm going to spend that kind of money. I'm not going to buy a resistor, you know, that's cost more what the test set's worth, really. So I just thought, well, you know, there's not much point in progressing any further with it. I'll just have to put it to one side until one of these attenuator blocks as a whole comes up on an auction site somewhere, eBay or whatever, and you know, purchase the whole unit rather than the individual part. But as I say, I thought this particular fault here was down to excessive RF power that had caused the cracking. Well, I've found a German website. There's a couple of people over in Germany that even work for Rhode Schwartz, which have various websites that are written in German, which I have to translate. And there's some very good articles on these Rhode Schwartz radio test sets. And believe it or not, this cracking on this substrate resistor is very common indeed on all these CMS radio test sets. So it's actually, from what I can understand after translating this German, appears to be some kind of manufacturing fault. And indeed this gentleman who is repairing this particular test set, who's done this article on, has been very lucky, because in his case the crack itself was actually the gold track, which is where the arrows are. But what he's done is very cleverly shown a picture of the actual crack itself somewhere, which you can see, and it's cracked across one corner, and he's done a very good job at taking a photograph of it. But I'm just trying to see if I can find it to show you. But the beauty of it is, where it's cracked in his case, it's actually this corner here. It's cracked from where the RF input jack is there, where my fingernail is, and it goes across. So it's sort of in that corner there, and it cuts across that track. Whereas my crack goes from here right the way across, halfway across this red attenuator section, right the way to here. So the RF path for the receive signal generator is fine, that goes through, but anything going right this way, the transmit signal, which is obviously fed out via these two legs here, and the power sensitive diode here, that measures the RF power, that unfortunately has got a crack straight through it. It's buried under all this. It's like multi-layers of tracks on top of this, with this red oxide paint or whatever it is that they put on. So yeah, I'm very surprised at Rohde Schwartz. I'm disappointed in Rohde Schwartz with the lack of assistance that I got from them, just with the price inquiry on that part. I think that, yeah, that's something that you need to be aware of. I've got other test instruments, Rohde Schwartz, as I said, that I'll be doing video on. I've got a signal generator which actually smoked me out in the workshop here, where it flamed off at the back with the mains filter. Now, you know, I've never really been a big fan of Rohde Schwartz test gear, to be honest with you. I've used it and had it over the years in various jobs, and I own some of it myself, but I've never really been a big fan of it. It's I think it's living on a past name, to be honest, Rohde Schwartz stuff. It's a bit like some of the other German cars that were produced many years ago, you know, Volkswagens and things, where they were really well made and really well built, and they lasted decades, and you know, and you could run them into the ground. And now you look at some models of German cars, and they're terrible for reliability, because they're living on like a past name, and yet the reliability and quality element have long since gone out the window. And I think it's the same with the test gear from Rohde Schwartz. I think, you know, gone are the days of the quality like you know, Rosenberger, Schlumberger, goodness knows what happened to them. Rohde Schwartz sort of got into the market, and then it was very much a case of yeah, German engineering, high performance, high accuracy, you know, good quality, lasts for decades. And to be fair to Rohde Schwartz, you know, had it not had a defective part in it, it would still be a good test instrument. But I think that they've gone a little bit sort of over egging the pudding when it comes to the price. And if it's an out of you know, support test set, and it's no longer supported as an instrument by Rohde Schwartz, surely the parts wouldn't be that expensive. If anything, they want to get rid of the parts, sell the parts off, so that they don't have to stock or support component parts for them. And I'll be honest, I've never ever paid anywhere near that for any spare part on any radio test set that I've ever repaired, ever, in my career, period. So that just shows you what the differences are, and that's what you can expect if you buy a Rohde Schwartz test instrument. Goodness knows how much the screen would cost if that ever were to get broken, or perhaps the keypads, rubber buttons drop out, or you know, some other damage occurs to the front panel. Maybe something strikes the front panel and somebody's interested in purchasing a new bezel. Perhaps that would cost £1,000, £2,000 maybe from Rohde Schwartz. So yeah, I'm disappointed in Rohde Schwartz. I think they could have been a bit more supportive. I think that the price point on that resistor is ridiculous, absolutely diabolical. I think they're just yeah, it's a disgrace, to be quite honest with you. But now that I've found out that it's not a unique failure, I'm very surprised that Rohde Schwartz have gone down that path, because they must know, as per this guy who's done this article, he works for Rohde Schwartz, this chap who's done this article in Germany, and he's actually said in this document that it's the most common fault that was on these instruments. And his particular instrument that he's purchased, he's actually documented what he's done to fix it. but it's obviously, you know, luck of the draw. Depends where that crack occurs as to whether or not it's fixable or not. So this will have to go away now. Well, there's two reasons why it has to go away. One is I need a proper service manual and a circuit diagram that will give me the relevant circuit info for fixing this port, RF port, the low power one, so I can get the correct gain and look at the amplifier stages properly for that particular part of that measurement. And secondly, I'll need to await one of these modules to become available, or resistors, to try and fix it or repair it. I've got some contacts in the RF test equipment repair industry. There are specialist companies that do repair test instruments like this quite often, and they may also have a spare part that is available much cheaper than what Rohde Schwartz were trying to charge me. But yeah, sort of coming to the end of this video now, I definitely think that if you are looking to purchase a Rohde Schwartz test instrument, that it's extremely important that if you're going to pay a lot of money out for one, that you make sure that it's thoroughly tested, that it all passes its self-test. And one of the things that I would like to remark on is that even with this module out of the unit, it will still pass its self-test. It goes through a self-test, and you can do a master reset, and it'll check all the internal modules, the RF power being one of them, and the RF synthesizer, and it will still pass the tests even without this module, because those tests are being carried out within the actual modules here that are mounted on the motherboard. And what also makes these difficult to repair as well is the fact that you can't sort of do accurate measurements on them unless you've got an extender built. So you'd have to make up a cable, which I've done, which connects down to this motherboard. You can see on the motherboard we've got a connector, and there's these modules pull out. Now the problem is that some of the adjustments that you need to make on these modules with the covers off, you have to have them out on the standoffs in order to do that measurement or adjustment. And also it makes it very difficult, unless you've built the extender cable, to actually carry out RF measurements and fault finding within the unit, within the modules. So that's something else that you need to be aware of with Rohde Schwartz test gear, is that it's basic insofar as the modules that come out, that unplug, that you can look at them and maintain them individually or replace them if you've got the money to do that. But one of the major issues is that it's not very friendly towards the amateur repairer who has bought one, now got a fault on it, and then they have to make up a cable, you know, to connect in, which is it's another problem. Which there are other test sets that are similar to this insofar as that methodology. The HP8920 radio test set, which is this instrument here, is very similar. That's got modules that plug in as well, but the connectors that are used in the HP8920 are 9-way DIN plugs, whereas on the Rohde Schwartz it's you know, something like a 48 pin socket. So again, I'm just yeah, it's one of these things where it's difficult to explain, but until you repair one yourself, you won't realise that it is a bit of a job to do with the Rohde Schwartz instrument. And of course, the component parts, the specialist parts that are custom built, such as, you know, the RF Attenuator, etc. No doubt there'll be other parts, such as a display and cosmetic parts, will probably be extremely expensive to purchase from Rohde Schwartz, simply because they've got you over a barrel and they're going to exploit that. You know, it's obviously an exploitative market. Now, other radio test instruments that I've done repairs on, the components are a fraction of the cost. of what any of the parts will be on a Rohde Schwartz. So this is what you've got to bear in mind. So if you're buying one of these, I mean, unfortunately in my case, I got taken for a bit of a ride with this, I think, because the guy who'd let this go never mentioned that he'd been into it himself and tried to repair it, but somebody has, for those cables to be labelled up and numbered down here for that one module. So somebody's been in it before, which I hadn't noticed, to be fair. But I don't want people being taken for a ride. I wouldn't dream of selling this instrument onto somebody else and not telling them what the problems are with it if I decided to get rid of it without repairing it. And I certainly wouldn't let it go with a bit of a kibosh repair in it, or knowing that the spectrum analyzer input there, or the low power RF port here, should I say, as not reading correctly, even if this was to read properly with that fixed. So I'll hold on to this instrument now until such time that I'm able to get the schematic diagrams, the component parts, and I'll repair it and I'll put it to one side, because eventually parts will come up for it. It's just a waiting game. But yeah, so if you are going to buy one, just make sure that you do thorough tests, not just relying on the self-test, because the self-test will pass no matter what, and you will find that, yeah, when it passes, it will actually not give you a genuine, truthful outcome of its true state. So, you know, bear that in mind, and just be aware that, you know, that you can still do tests on it while the module's out, and it'll still pass. So now if I just demonstrate that by plugging the IEC lead in the back, and then I can show you what I mean. So here we are. Look, so it's going to pass all those tests. It says okay, okay, okay. There you go. So it's passed all of its tests, and even if you do a master reset here, and then you reset it all, if I've done the right thing. Oh, it's where is it now? Config, master reset, enter, and then it'll still pass, you know. So it's not using that module as being you know, a way or a method of testing the RF paths, and so obviously, you know, it's just one of those things where if you're going to buy one, you need to use another instrument in order to do that, to check it, to make sure that it's, you know, it's functional. So yeah, I would be very careful before buying Rohde Schwartz gear. It's very expensive to repair when it goes wrong, especially if it's something where the RF power side isn't being read properly. So, you know, bear that in mind. It's good advice to use another test instrument to compare the measurements with on these if you're purchasing them, and be aware if there's any buttons ripped out or the display's broken, the bezel's smashed, some of the cosmetic failure that you think, oh, that'll be cheap to fix. Think again. Rohde Schwartz gear, it's just the Rolls Royce of RF test gear so far as pricing's concerned. The other signal generator that I'll do a video on that smoked me out in the workshop when it nearly burst into flames used a really cheap branded mains filter in the back, and this is a trouble when you're buying decent quality test gear, or that's a perception that Rohde Schwartz would give in their marketing strategies, that you're buying the best of the best of the best. In actual fact, when you whip the lid off it, it's in my view A lot of the Rohde Schwartz gears, a lot of rubbish inside. You know, it uses cheap componentry. It might be very well constructed on the external side of things, you know, on the case parts cosmetically, and it looks the part from the front, but internally, even some of the more modern Rohde Schwartz test equipment that I've seen being stripped down and looked at on YouTube with other channels, it's very much the same architecture internally as this old test set is. So they haven't really evolved with Rohde Schwartz, I don't think. And the other thing is that the quality of the components, for the money that you pay for the test instrument, you're getting poorer quality components than they are in comparable test instruments as well. Some of the electrolytic capacitors and transistors and components that are used in the Rohde Schwartz test set are actually quite poor quality and lower temperature ratings than they are in other test instruments, and they used components from lesser known manufacturers, and indeed the quality of those components isn't as good as it is in other manufacturers of radio test instruments. I'm not saying that's the case across all Rohde Schwartz range, but certainly when you look inside this series of radio test sets, there's nothing that sort of would present the reasons for that price, you know, for paying that price point on these test instruments. And often Rohde Schwartz test equipment can be twice the cost of a comparable test instrument from another manufacturer, and that's because you're paying for the name, you know, rather than the quality. Again, it's only my opinion, and having known this equipment for decades and worked with it, I can honestly say from my own self that I'm not very pleased with Rohde Schwartz technical support. I've never really been able to get a good working relationship with Rohde Schwartz. They're not interested in the little man or anybody who's not paying them £100,000 a year for service support. They deliberately overprice the componentry in my mind, just to throw you off so that they don't have to deal with you. Or and the customer service is quite poor, very poor indeed. I had to fight tooth and nail to get the price out of them just for that one part, and send lots of emails and chases and follow-ups. They were passing me back and forth. You don't want that when you bought a piece of test kit and you were trying to fix it. You don't want to be run around the houses and given a lot of fob-offs, you know. So, and I don't get that with the other manufacturers of test equipment. I found, you know, in the good old days of Marconi, IFR, Aeroflex even, they've always been very supportive, and you can even speak to engineers as well directly. Well, I've not had that experience with Rohde Schwartz, and furthermore, you know, other equipment's been more repairable insofar as accessing service manuals and technical information, which you seem to have that difficulty with Rohde Schwartz. They're not very forthcoming with information and technical help, in my experience anyway. But I'd be interested to see what others have experienced, and by all means leave comments below. So with that, I'll leave a link in the description to the other video of me looking at the repair on this. And yes, so buyer beware, buy Rohde Schwartz. You want to make damn sure before you hand your money over that it works properly 100% before you take it away. Thanks for watching the video. Stay tuned for more, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.